Does anyone actually care about art history? I mean, I do, but outside the insular world of art historians, humanities nerds, and people who want to seem dark academia, is it actually worth talking about? For me, looking at a piece of art is like looking at a puzzle, where you put the pieces together and it reveals something not only about the context in which it was made, but also about us. The artists, the spectators, the viewed. It has been used as a way to analyze dynamics of power, the human psyche, and how we imagine the world to be. But am I even right to make this kind of video? I mean, probably not. I'm not even majoring in art history, I just really like it. A lot. And I need to stop rambling about it to anyone who lets me, so why not ramble about it into the void of the internet? I guess that liking it is probably enough. Okay, here we go. Okay. Hi. My name is Fred Oliver Beeby, and a lot of people call me Ollie, but you can also call me Fred, or Freddy, or literally anything if you let me talk about my niche interests, which is what we're doing today. For the majority of my life, I hated art museums. This sounds like some kind of confessional, which is weird, but I'm coming forward as an art museum hater. Really didn't like them. I mean, in the art museum, you're faced with these blank white walls on which they've placed various works which you're assumed to know why they're important, and everyone goes through the same paces, ambling around, staring at a piece for about 2 or so minutes, so that everyone makes sure to everyone that you know you've got it. Maybe you lean in, you see if you can spot something interesting. You probably don't unless you're like super into brush strokes. You maybe make like a noise if you're lucky. There's a plaque with some information on it, but usually it's just the name, date, artist, and medium staring back at you. So often it's nothing more than this kind of torturous elitist ritual of signaling to the world that yep, you know art. It's not fun, it's alienating to like essentially everyone. I'm not going to dive into the colonial history of museums and how one of the way their exhibitionary order functions is through the alienation of a majority of their audiences because they weren't built for a majority of audiences, but that's really a very complex subject, and it would be irresponsible, I think, to dive into it so shallowly. I do want to note here, though, on that subject, I've titled this video, Why You Hate Art Museums, and if the reason you hate art museums is because you feel alienated in the museum space, or you feel like it wasn't built for you, or you don't belong, those feelings are more than justified and need to continue to be discussed. Art history can be, it doesn't have to be by any means, but it can be both an elitist but also an intensely white, Eurocentric area of study. Most of my knowledge on the subject is about European and American art from 1500 to 1900, because that's mostly what I've been taught, especially in survey-style courses. And that's probably what I'm most likely going to be speaking about, because it's what I know the most about. But that should not by any means suggest that that is all there is to speak about. Not to overstate the participatory and democratizing qualities of the digital space like YouTube, because I think that's vastly overstated, but I want to start making videos about art history to start a conversation that anyone can join in and speak about more than what I've come to focus on in my studies. I obviously don't see myself as being the one to change this field or the way people talk about this field. There are hundreds of incredible, revolutionary art historians who have been shifting this field for decades upon decades. I'm just trying to toss my thoughts out in the open so I stop rambling about them and create space for those more open conversations to be had. I mean, we have YouTube for everything. We have history YouTube, we have dress history YouTube, we have death history YouTube. So now I'm trying to bring my attempt at art history YouTube. Back to the space of art museums, rather than how we talk about art and art history more generally. You might be asking, I thought you said for most of your life you didn't like art museums. And I did say that. I've actually really come to appreciate art museums, and the process of that was kind of also me falling in love with art history. And I think it was because I learned how to read art. I think it's a real shame that so many art museums require this kind of visual literacy from visitors instead of providing perhaps more interpretation through like exhibit text, but I want to share with you how I approach new art when I, say, walk into an art museum. So maybe that you, as well, could get more out of your local art museum. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have a degree in art history. I am working on a degree in media studies, and I haven't actually had anything published, but I'm working on it. I'm just your friendly neighborhood art history himbo here to give my barely seared takes, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I just want to talk about this thing that I really like. Many of us, I think, when we're faced with a work of art for the very first time, especially in a museum setting, assume that we need to recognize, or should recognize, the pieces we're seeing, or at very least the artist, or the period, or really even what the painting is of, to get some kind of meaning beyond aesthetic pleasure from the piece. This is, as I've said, extremely alienating, because it suggests you need this kind of academic training where you have been taught this like long list of like canonical works, and so, yeah, as I said, this can be quite alienating. This isn't true, though. Art has, for centuries, across cultures, been intended for a reception among an audience with no conception of art history. A work made in the 1500s, placed in a church, is not assuming that its audience is going to have some conception of the long history of art. While they may have recognized like an allegory familiar to their time, or recognized perhaps the work of a famous artist, the main way viewers have interacted with art over time is by the art working on them. The techniques, compositions, and strategies are not merely motifs to recognize, but cogs in the machine of the artwork attempting to affect us. As I said, my area of study is called media studies, which I won't get into too much here, but comment, I guess, if you want to know more about it. It's kind of an not well understood field from the outside, but a concept fundamental to that area of study is this idea that media, in this case artworks, mediate. They don't merely present a subject, but affect that subject and affect us. Through identifying basic strategies like composition, we're let into this secret of what media is attempting to mediate. How it is working us all over, to loosely quote Marshall McLuhan, the dad of media studies. Alright, let's start with a work. Here I've chosen Fragonard's The Swing, mostly because I kind of see it all over the internet in like dark, light academia spaces, and I think it's just pretty to look at also. I like poofy dresses and cute ladies. So what can we see in the image? This is the point where an art history professor would usually ask for hands, but the medium of YouTube doesn't let me do this, but feel free to comment down below with your thoughts. I like thoughts. I want to focus on composition because that's a great place to start, and because you can use it for basically any work of art you happen upon in a museum. So, how is this image composed? First, I notice that there is a very shallow sense of space in this image. It's obviously not completely flat, and we are shown some depth by the objects in the background being much smaller and therefore seeming further away, but for the most part it really feels like the different planes of the image are kind of smooshed into one. We are not encouraged to imagine a space or a world beyond this picture. It makes it feel like it's in the here and the now, which will keep coming up as I talk about this painting. There's not some kind of divine distance like you might see in a landscape painting or in a religious painting from earlier periods. I'll say this adds to the frivolity of this image, which is a term I'm going to keep on using. We aren't encouraged to think beyond the present moment, and that's kind of fun. Next, I notice that there are 3 figures, but they're somewhat unbalanced. Our scandalous lady is leaning out over the gentleman trying to sneak a peek on the lower left, and this lack of balance makes the image feel kind of rowdy and off-kilter. The way her shoe is tossed in the air really sends this home for me. Everything in this image is caught in a moment of free fall. The shoe, the man falling backwards, the swing itself. Once again, we are focused on this present moment, this very short, ephemeral moment, which is frivolous, wild, and we aren't thinking about consequences. I want to talk about one final element of the image. This isn't intended to be a comprehensive or lengthy visual analysis. I just want to introduce you to how one would go about this process. We can easily notice the placement of light in this image coming from the top, straight onto the woman on the swing. This might remind you of a spotlight on a stage. She is our focus. We aren't focusing on some allegory of morality, some image of God, or anything else of real importance. We're just focusing on this young woman having a bit of fun. This is an image of decadence, frivolity, and sensual delights. It's fun, it's naughty, it's not too serious. So suddenly, we've learned a little bit about the artist, Fragonard, that he, at least sometimes, is an artist who paints these scenes of frivolity, of excess, of decadence, lighthearted. And we've learned a little bit about the movement, Rococo. It often strays from a very serious subject that one might see represented in other genres of art, and instead focuses on these kind of moments of delight. And we've also learned a little bit about what this painting is about, just from looking at how the image is laid out, just from looking at the composition. There's so much that could be said and has been said about this work and its relationship to things like pre-revolutionary French imagination, how it represents the feminine subject in Temptation, how that use of light I mentioned earlier is actually very subversive when we think about how light, especially coming from the top of an image like that, is usually used to represent the divine. But we don't need to know about those conversations to appreciate what this painting is doing. So when you approach a new piece of artwork, look for its layout, how and where the subjects are situated, how they relate to the space, and how they position themselves in relationship to you, the viewer. It's a great way to start. This entry point of identifying techniques in the works to see how they're working is what made me really like art museums and really come to love art history. You can read historical analysis and complex theory, both of which I enjoy, but you don't have to enjoy a trip to the museum. Art doesn't have to be intimidating, scary, or alienating. I truly believe that through art and through understanding art history, we can better understand how we have and how we continue to relate to the world around us, to each other, and to ourselves. So yeah, not to moralize, but I think you should care about art history. I do. Thank you for watching this video. I've spent, I guess, over a year creating videos for others, and I wanted to try my hand at creating something of my own. If you have any questions, thoughts, or suggestions of works you'd like me to talk about, leave those in the comments down below. I'm planning to use this channel primarily to do kind of short, casual video essays about works I really like, so that I can blow off a little bit of steam without having to write papers about them. But I'm also more than happy to take your direction. I just want to talk about art history, and so give me suggestions. It makes me happy. And if you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you want. After all, audience participation is a medium specificity of YouTube, which is a joke just for me. It's a media studies joke, and it's just me pointing out a fact. Thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.